everybody, and welcome to the behind-the-scenes video version of today's Bossed Up podcast interview. I am so excited to be joined by Carrie Kerpen, the co-founder of Likeable Media. She's also got a rad podcast you gotta check out called All the Social Ladies, and a show on Facebook where she interviews badass women in business who've learned a thing or two about how to work it. Carrie, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Emily. I'm excited.
I'm pumped. So today we're tackling a career conundrum that came in from Celine. Celine is a soon-to-be grad who is looking to jump into a competitive industry. And if there's anybody who knows a thing or two about standing out in a crowded marketplace, I thought, who better to talk to than a communications genius who's mastered the online marketplace that is social media. So first, before we dive into Celine's question, tell us a little bit about how you got into digital media and really what the story behind Likeable Media is all about.
So the story behind Likeable Media was not that dissimilar to Celine's challenge or anyone's challenge, really, which is that we had a problem and we needed to solve it, right? She's thinking about how to stand out. She's got to look at a solution and do something really bold and interesting. We had a problem, which was that my husband was a larger than life personality and wanted everyone he's ever known to come to our wedding. Now, Emily, I'm not talking about like people from high school. Legit, like he was on this chat right now. He would be like, "Oh, hi, Emily, I just met you. Come to my wedding. So excited." And so we had a problem because in New York City, weddings aren't cheap. And there are very few places to hold that many people of everyone who you meet in the street. And so we had to get really creative. And we both came from a brand marketing background and decided that we would pitch a minor league baseball stadium. We went to the Brooklyn Cyclones, who's the minor league affiliate of the New York Mets. And we said, "Hey, we have a crazy idea. We want you to have your normal game and have a theme for the night called Our Field of Dreams. If instead of like Pepsi tossing t-shirts into the audience, like normally at a ball game, 1-800-Flowers will toss bridal bouquets. It'll all be wedding themed. We'll get married on the field after the game and we'll raise money for charity and you'll get a lot of press."
I love this.
Yeah, so this was just really an attempt to solve a problem. And of course, they said, "You're crazy, but try it." It worked. We raised $100,000 in sponsorships. We raised $20,000 for the MS Society. And we got all of this press. And so a lot of the press was not only traditional, but it was also digital and really took off. And so all of these sponsors came to us and they were like, "This was amazing, you guys. You really understand digital." Because this was back in 2006 when very few people really understood.
Yeah.
"You get it. You got to do something like this again." We're like, "Do it again." Not having a sponsored baby, not having a sponsored divorce, all the questions. So we said, we're going to start an agency based on great word of mouth marketing. And that was 2006. And in 2007, Facebook opened beyond the college market. We knew that social media was going to be the fastest form of word of mouth. And we just jumped. And so cut to now, 12 years later, we have a 50-person agency in New York City, still focused primarily on social first marketing, but expanding way beyond that to, to all kinds of advertising.
I wish I'd talked to you like a year ago. So I could have.
I get that question a lot about sponsored weddings. And it's funny. It's, it was like, it was kind of like just this perfect moment, this perfect storm of things. And
I love the idea that your company started on your wedding day, which is so poetic. So you co-founded, it's beautiful. You co-founded with your husband, and then now you both have authored books about your expertise. Is that correct? Can you tell me more about that?
So in 2010, Dave was approached to write a book around social media at a time where there weren't as many social media marketers. It wasn't as crowded of a landscape. So he became an author and wrote Likeable Social Media, which became a New York Times bestseller. And then he went into the author space, writing and speaking. And eventually he wanted to launch a startup. And so technology startup, so different from the agency. And so when we opened the agency, it was great because I was the chief operating officer. I made sure everything happened. Clients were happy, we were staffed, the bills were paid, all of these things. And Dave was the CEO. He was the face. He was the boss. And so in 2013, he left to start his own thing. And I stepped into his shoes as the CEO of Likeable. And of course, at that time, it was a very different world. It was much more crowded than it was in 2007 when
Yeah.
nobody was doing this. And most of the leaders in my industry were all really loud, extroverted, and male. And
Mm-hmm.
I was none of these things, none. And so for me, it was really, really challenging. And ultimately, what I ended up doing was connecting with and utilizing the strength of other women together, the collective power of women to help grow my business. I launched a podcast called All the Social Ladies, where I would interview women and I would talk to women at the brand level and really start to just really get out there and network and use that power. And then, based off of the success of that strategy, I launched a book called Work It Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business, which really addresses a lot of challenges like the one that Celine lays out for your podcast.
Excellent. And I have to say, as CEO, you've also landed these awards as the top 50, one of the top 50 ad agencies and the top 50 fastest growing women owned business by WPO and American Express Open. Seems like an actually awesome place to work, having my real come up story started in the world of political digital marketing, where
Yeah.
we also saw those same trends. And so I'm excited to be speaking with not only a CEO who hires people and knows how to grow a fun and fantastic team, because that's relevant to Celine's question, but also someone who knows a thing or two about how to stand out in a crowded marketplace. So top of the head thoughts on what Celine should really be considering as she starts figuring out a solution to her challenge about how to stand out as a job seeker.
So, my dear Queen Celine, I would say, first of all, I could always tell you to do lots of interesting things to stand out. For instance, in my husband's most recent book, he talks about how he only wears orange shoes. He developed a signature style, and this is it. He only wears orange shoes, and he's known for that. And people
Wow.
identify with him because he has this signature style. There are lots of tips and tricks like that. However, the tip and trick that I feel is counterintuitive but so necessary is to think long and hard about what your weaknesses are, what you think your weaknesses are, and use them to your advantage. So I just did a show yesterday where I was talking to a woman that was the youngest vice president in her company. She was one of the only Indian women at her company. She was one of the only women that was in leadership at her company. And at first, she found that very, very intimidating. And ultimately, she started to own that to stand out. Similarly, with me, when I stepped into Dave's shoes, his orange shoes, as the likable, I was not loud and I was not extroverted. And the thought of being on social media and talking about myself all day, which was every leader I saw in the space, was like, I'm going to hustle. It's me. Look at me. Look at me. And I felt like doing that as an attempt to stand out would be my worst nightmare. And so
Yeah.
leaning into that, knowing who I was and knowing that that was a weakness allowed me to take that weakness and work it into my strength, which was I'm not going to talk about myself all day on social media. I'm actually going to reach out to other women who might be scared to tell their own stories. And I'm going to tell their stories on social media. And that's going to make me stand out and be more interesting. And in that process, I eventually learned how to get over and past the things that I thought were weaknesses. So my real advice is think about what makes you insecure, because whatever makes you insecure is really the truest version of who you are, and you're kind of feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
Flip the script on it. How can you use that makes you insecure to actually make you stand out?
Right. And to start being your own champion instead of your own critic, right?
Yeah.
And that's so,
Turn the negative to a positive.
I really like that because it's so different than the entire framework that women and all people really are taught in school.
Yep.
In school, we get really good at figuring what somebody else wants from us.
Yep.
And you can work hard and put your nose to the grindstone and deliver on those expectations when there's a syllabus in front of you.
Yes.
Life after graduation is so different. You have to start defining for yourself what you want your success to look like. And so starting to get comfortable with what makes you feel insecure is just a compassionate way to build confidence in yourself, I feel like.
Yes, the greatest gift you can ever give yourself is to learn and understand who you are. Once you
Yeah.
learn and understand who you are and you are unapologetic about who
Mm,
you are, there are things that you can do to work on yourself, but that's on your own terms. Really understanding yourself will help you stand out because you will be totally authentically and unapologetically you.
yeah. I'm almost thinking, though, as a recent grad, I had to learn that the hard way by figuring out, oh, this job is not what is true to myself.
Exactly. And you're going to trip,
Yeah.
you're gonna fall, and you're going to take something. See, I would rather see you swing and miss
Right.
than not swing. So take something. The only way you're going to know it is to actually try it. And there's, of course, there are all of the things about if you want to succeed in an organization fitting into their infrastructure, but you can still be your authentic self and do that. And I think I want to see you trying and maybe taking something
Yeah.
that you say, okay, this is my dream job. This might not be my dream job, but I'm actually going to try it and see because sometimes what you think is right, it's kind of like wedding dresses when you go wedding dress shopping. You go and
Yeah.
say, I want the strapless dress. And then you're trying on other dresses and you're like, oh my God, the cap sleeve is a much better
Mm.
fit or the A line or whatever it is. You have to try the
Yes.
and you've got to just get in there.
Yeah, because that distance between what you think you want and what you actually realize you want can be a pretty grand one,
Absolutely.
especially after a lifetime of socialization of performing for others. Now, Celine, is really the time to leave that mindset behind, but it's tricky. I think a lot of women in particular fall into this perfectionistic, performance focused trap because we kind of kick ass in school, right?
Yep.
We've been out earning our male counterparts in degrees for 30 years
Right.
because we know how to follow the rules.
Right.
But it's tricky when you've got to make up your own rules. So,
Yeah. I mean,
as someone
yeah.
as someone who hires and interviews folks, what are the kind of rule breakers you're looking for when you're interviewing for folks in your team, or what are the ways that folks can positively stand out?
I am going to tell you a story of my most recent interview. Okay. And she hasn't
Okay.
even been hired yet, but I know she will be because I have to go through a variety of interviewing checkpoints, but I know she's going to get that job. She reached out to me and she said, and I'm the CEO. So I normally I'm involved in the hiring, but I'm not running the hiring. I need
Sure.
15 minutes of your time and gave me exactly why and, made sure it was very focused on a limited amount of time and what value she could offer to me. I took her 15 minutes. She walks in. First of all, she was here early, but not too early. She walks in with a cup of coffee and she was like, I needed to bring you coffee. I know you only have 15 minutes. Here you go.
Wow.
She came in with a mission. Like, here's what I want to tell you. I have really great strength in the PR space, but I need to get into digital. I'm willing to take a step down in order to do that in my career. And here I am. And I just wanted you to know that I'm here and I'm willing actually to take a position at a mid manager level versus a senior manager level because I know what I don't know yet. And I'm going to prove it to you that I can.
Wow.
To me, it was the effective use of the 15 minutes. And
Yeah.
she knew what she wanted to say. She was prepared. She was ready to go. And then she had follow-up questions for me that were so good and so strong. And I think that's the key is like, you want to stand
Yeah.
out? I'm telling you, most of these interviews are a snooze fest. Be curious. Be genuinely interested in learning about the person you're talking to. Genuinely curious. Think about what value you can offer to them and what you want to learn about them and what you can learn from them in that 15 minutes. I would look at every interview
Yeah.
as an opportunity to get like free coaching, really, because they're giving
Yeah.
all of this advice and you're having a dialogue. I think that that's key.
So key. And I love that you're giving a good demonstration of what a strong informational interview looks like.
Yes.
Because informational interviews are almost overplayed in how important they are, but I can't overstate how important they are because that's the basis of networking and growing your community and making friends with people in your industry who are in a position to potentially hire you someday.
They're
But
essential.
yeah.
Essential. And if you take the timing and the pressure out of it,
Yeah.
it makes such a stronger impact. I'll tell you what doesn't stand out is applying to jobs that are out there, on Indeed or any of these things. You're in a sea of other people. But if you look at where you want to work and you look at setting informational interviews with people who you have any form of connection to in any way, whether it's alumni, whether it's knowing through a friend of a friend, that is how you will stand out.
And how you run that informational interview, like you mentioned, matters even more than getting it. Like getting it is a good first step, but getting it and then ruining it, coming to it late, unprepared, unfocused, not curious about that person, not knowing anything about that person is worse than not having the informational interview at all.
It's coming to it expecting that it's like an inbound interview, expecting like it's
Right.
a type of interview where they're going to ask you a slew of questions. They're not. You asked for the meeting. It's your meeting. And that to
Right.
me is a powerful thing, right? It's like, okay, wow, I asked for this meeting. I got this time. What am I going to use these 15 minutes for?
Right. And so being proactive about knowing your, agenda, so to speak, knowing how you're going to go in and state a clear transfer of values. That's the part I think trips a lot of job seekers up is who am I to offer any value to someone amazing like Carrie Kerpen? Like, how am I supposed to ever come up with anything? Do you have any advice on that? Because I find that happen a lot.
Yes, everybody has value to offer. Everybody. Here's the thing for young people, you have no idea what it's like to be somebody who is what I call a digital immigrant, right? Somebody who was not born into this world of digital first communication. You are digital natives. You are born into this space. You are learning at a rate that is infinitely faster than those of us who weren't. I am telling you right now that the first time I saw this, right, I knew a lot about Facebook in 2007. I knew a lot about Twitter. I got these networks. They were really felt good to me. The second Snapchat started and stories started, I had to learn a whole new language. And that to me gave me really good insight into how my clients feel. And so for you, think about what you can offer and how you can say, hey, by the way, I don't know if you've seen how video is impacting LinkedIn lately. Have you thought about doing any video stuff? I love this piece you wrote or this article that mentioned you. You should consider looking at this kind of stuff or anything that helps position you. Or guess what? Another thing too, a lot of times I tell them like if you're investigating someone has kids, ask them about how their kids are experiencing digital media and do they struggle with that relationship.
Right.
And like coming from a young person first, having that conversation from that perspective, trust me, every parent who is in a business position in the world is worrying about that right now too.
Yeah.
So for fresh young perspectives, think about the things that you know about
Totally.
and how you can engage around that.
Right. And don't be hesitant to say, oh, I just read something about that, or I just heard something on a podcast about that.
Yes.
Be forthright with connecting powerful people to powerful resources or to other people that you think they should know.
Bring someone a book that you think is really valuable based on what you've read about them. I had this book. I just read it. It was so good. It made me think of actually our interview that was coming up because I know that you're very focused on change. And so whatever, leadership transformation or, whatever it is, find something that could really interest them and be a part of that conversation.
I love it. Now, part of standing out in the job hunt reminds me a lot about standing out as a brand on the internet. It's not an easy feat. There's a lot of noise in the space. There's a crowded marketplace, a lot of job applicants, just like there's a lot of branded Twitter accounts out there. When it comes to branding Celine or really defining what Celine cares the most about and how that connects to the organizations she's interviewing with, do you have any basic starting tips for thinking about your own personal brand and how to communicate that digitally as well as in person?
Yes. One of the things that I write about in the book is something that I call the total stranger test. So this will be really good for your audience to look at. Everything you put out on social media, everything that's across the web, when you're Googled, is the impression of you. It's things that people will be looking at before they hire you. It's things that people who've never met you are looking at. It's people who are potentially dating you, like you name it, it's out there. Okay. And so the reality is you want to think long and hard about how you want to be perceived. And so the total stranger test is this. You come up with 3 adjectives where how you'd like to be perceived as a person. So I would like to be perceived as a warm, good mother who is a killer entrepreneur. Okay. Like really, those three things. Okay. Then what you do is you ask your friends to find a friend who doesn't know you, one of their friends, but who does not know you. Ask them to Google you and to take a look at your social profiles. Whatever your privacy settings are today, don't change them, just leave them. Ask them to come up with 3 words that they think describe you. Then look at the 2 sets of 3 words and see how they intersect or whether they intersect and whether or not they're drastically different. I actually interviewed my daughter, Charlotte Kerpen, on this on my show Work It on Facebook. And I had her do this test with a couple of people in the office. And they were shocked about how they were perceived. And she was very interested in how she was perceived. There were some things that hit and some things that missed. And so this is an ideal opportunity to create your own narrative. You can construct who you are. It should be authentically you, but it should be the best of you. And so this type of exercise gives you an opportunity to kind of gut check on that.
And how would you advise someone who is not super active on social media, who, you know, like a lot of the job seekers I know nowadays don't even have a Facebook profile or are ditching that altogether? How do you advise folks who are just starting to build up a social trail? Like, is it something, I think a lot of people are afraid. Yeah. Is it something to just cleanse and stay away from? Or how does that compare to like your resume, for instance, in how an employer sees you?
Presence is a presence, right? If you have no presence and people are looking for you, you will not stand out in the way that others who utilize that opportunity do. And so the question becomes, that doesn't mean you need to be on Facebook with a public profile or Instagram sharing pictures of your food all day. It could be that you're writing thought leadership pieces on LinkedIn. It could be that you're sharing articles that you think are interesting. It doesn't mean that you have to create so much of your own content. It just means that if you're not creating some kind of profile and some kind of footprint that shows who you are letting others determine who you are. And I think that putting it in your own hands, there's never been a more exciting time to do that. Resumes, if you want to talk about not standing out, no matter how creative your resume is, it's in a sea of other resumes. And with this vibrant, multimedia, rich sort of world and landscape, you have an opportunity to really showcase yourself in the best way.
Totally. I'm a huge proponent of the CV website. So a lot of folks think I'm not a digital person, so why would I have a website? I'm just, Celine, a grad who's looking for a job. And when my fiance, when Brad was looking for a full-time job that would enable us to move from DC to Denver, which we did last year, we built him a website. We branded him. He got on Instagram because his work in architecture and interior design is so ripe for visual expression. And this is a man who is not a copywriter, is not a photographer, is not a website builder. But we sat down and really made that happen once we clarified what his goals were and who his ideal audience was. And let me tell you, that definitely helped push the needle when it came to building a paper trail for delivering on his business card after having informational interviews. And he got a job within a month of having those informational interviews here in Denver.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely helps you stand out. And one of my favorites on the websites that I use about.me a lot. You don't need to build something from scratch. You can use things that exist that are put in place for exactly that purpose.
Exactly. And it's so easy nowadays with options like Wix and Squarespace. Not sponsored, but feel free to call me Wix or Squarespace, I mean, those options out there have templates specifically for CV or resume templates, right? A website that basically says, here's who I am, here's what I'm all about, here's why you should hire me. And having that consistent brand as you start your job search, Celine, can make you really pop, especially in addition to having a great informational interview plan.
Absolutely.
So any other thoughts on how we can stay ahead of the curve as maybe professionals of a certain age, not recent grads? I think a lot of us get a little complacent and sit on our heels. Now we've got IGTV coming out and everyone's starting to experiment with video. I hear Pinterest is about to have some more video components to it. What do you do to stay on the cutting edge of growth when it comes to being a savvy brand or job seeker on the internet?
First, I read always, constantly reading, whether it's a business publication or a publication that's specifically around social or digital. I am constantly reading, looking at best in class things that people are doing. Second, I play. And even if I don't have a strong strategy on something, I will always test and play. You'll see me everywhere. You might not see me lean into every single piece of every new thing, but you will see me try it because I believe that the only way to understand it is to use it. I have the same experience as a parent when you have all kinds of new things that you have no idea, what the kids are even doing. I believe
Right.
that you have to try it because otherwise you're lacking the context of understanding of what's happening. So like I'm not a gamer, but I will look deeply into Twitch. You know what I mean? Like so looking at all
Yeah.
of those things are areas where I'm active, even if I'm not constantly participating. So knowing the networks, like play with them so you understand.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just get on it, do something,
Yep.
see what happens,
Yep.
playing and experimenting.
Yep.
That's good. Do you have any favorite publications that you read or favorite sites that you go to that you think not enough people know
Really
about?
it's for job seeking or for digital. I like Digiday. I read all the ad trades to see, I read Ad Age and Ad Week and all of that stuff. But I also look at, an old favorite would be like looking at Mashable or any of those guys. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of changes. And one thing that I did for me personally, I wanted to understand business better, and so I read the Wall Street Journal every day. And at first, it was like reading a different language. Eventually it made sense to me because I had a fear around finance and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I wanted to really become more financially fluent. And so I just started reading. I love the time.
Yeah.
So,
That's so smart. And in a world where fewer and fewer folks are reading,
yep.
as an author yourself, I'm sure you care. And I have a book coming out next year, and I'm like, are people still reading books? It's encouraging.
They are. They are still reading.
Yeah,
They just consume them differently, right?
sure.
Read them on Kindles or they read them, but people still read books. And
That's
I
good.
will read your book for sure.
Oh, yay. I'll have to send you a copy as soon as it's out. It's coming out next year. I'm excited.
Good.
Last question for you. NPR has been doing a ton of coverage lately about screen time and kids,
Yep.
especially babies. And actually, as it relates to parents putting screens in front of kids so that parents can get on their own screens and do whatever it is they got to do. What's your take as a digital professional and a parent? What are some of the norms you have established in your household, or what's your take on how this is affecting our kids and how we can all be more mindful about it?
It's a great question. In my mind, there is no one right answer to this question because it's quite a privileged world when a parent has to get work done because they have no other option and they need a minute to distract their children. And in the past, you would have played in a ball pit or with trains, and now they're doing it digitally. Okay. So
Sure.
any judgment, first thing I believe is that if a child is safe and in a good space, we need a judgment-free zone. So first, as parents, we need to stick together. I can only share with you my own philosophy. My own philosophy is as follows. I think there's a spectrum of parent in terms of super relaxed and do, kind of free range. And then there's like micromanage every activity they do online. I am somewhere in between. We have definite times of no screen time. We have no phones in the bedroom at night. We have no phones at the dinner table. And that's for parents too, by the way.
Yeah.
This is walk. Okay. And then we have time together as a family when we're doing things where it's just kind of understood that there are no phones. That being said, my kids are on social media, not one more than the other. It depends by age. My middle one, who is 11, is on social media a lot. And I don't micromanage. I really don't. I check in. I do spot checks. That's my biggest thing. But I do talk a lot for parents about ways that they can stay on top of it. There are lots of tools to do that. As far as screens and babies, We limit, I have a 3-year-old also. I really run the gamut on age of children.
You do, as a parent. I was like, I didn't realize you had older kids. I was looking at your Instagram. I'm like, I've seen the little ones.
Right. 15, 11, and 3. And my 3-year-old, we limit his access on time, but I will tell you, he learns a lot from stuff that is digital. And I just believe that some of this is about shifting to a different way of learning. I mean, we have these same conversations about TV and when kids should be. I think I would follow whatever the American Pediatrics Association talks about, but honestly, from speaking from experience, I mean, Seth is doing math at 3 years old, and that's not because I'm doing this intense amount of training with no screen.
Right.
I mean, he's learning great stuff. Just watch.
That's awesome.
You have to, with young kids, you have to watch because they can control. They can very quickly go to the next YouTube video, and next thing you know, there's something bad there. So you just have to watch.
Yeah, and check out those parental controls that some of them offer. And do you have a password rule? Like everybody's passwords to everything?
Password. Yes.
Yeah. That to me is like
but I don't
major. Me and my partner know each other's passwords. You know what I mean? Like,
you have to.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And I loved one of the tips that NPR suggested as they were covering this story this week. They were talking about a digital Sabbath, this idea of every weekday or one day a weekend, everybody knows it's digital detox day and we put our phones away. And just creating that environment, like you said, where it's a little bit, embarrassing or uncool. It's seen as uncool to be the one on the phone when everyone else is having a good time. I think is a environment we all can bring to whether it's brunch with your gal pals or dinner with your family.
Yep, 100%.
Awesome.
Just having clear rules and parameters. I write for Family Online Safety Institute. And the main thing I say with kids and social media, especially as they get to the middle age section of life, middle school.
Got it.
Especially they get to middle school. I have an acronym POEM, which is participate, make sure that you're on the networks before you let them on, openly communicate, establish rules, establish guidelines, talk about contracts, really educate yourself. Looking at things like FOSI.org is an amazing organization for that. And then monitor. You have to have some form of monitoring. And I think that for me is a strategy that's worked really well.
That's awesome. Well, Carrie, I feel like we've run the gamut here and I have so much to learn from you. I'm so excited to hear about all the great projects that you're involved with. So if you folks want to hear more from Carrie and her incredible guests that she has on all of her platforms, make sure to tune in for All the Social Ladies, her podcast, which you can find wherever you're listening to Bossed Up, and Work It, her show on Facebook. Carrie, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was great.